Right, UFC Fight Night Abu Dhabi. First of all, got to talk about that Sandhagen fight with Umar. Sandhagen used to be a very creative striker who would create things that you just couldn't read or predict, like that flying knee, wheel kicks, level changing into different strikes, moving off the centre line, hitting you with like a cross. He don't do that anymore. He's gone from a creative striker into like a grappling geek. And the reason I'm using that word is because look at the last three opponents he's fought. The majority of them have been strikers. And what has he done? Grappled with them. He hasn't looked to strike. And I don't know why it is. Yes, you want to improve your grappling, but it's like his striking has gone backwards. And you might say, Umar's a very good striker. He's a very good light sparring type of striker. Like, he doesn't hit hard. He doesn't really land anything with that much conviction. It's just like a little tap, a kick to the body, maybe a roundhouse kick across to the body. It's nothing special. It's very basic, but it's working. And do you want to know why it was working? Because Sandhagen looked like a fish out of water again, scared to try and strike with Umar for God knows what reason, because you should know in your mind he's not going to have the power to knock you out. He knocked out Raoni Barcelos. That guy's an old man, and even then I've been questioning his chin. So I'm not going to read too much into that. But it was the fact that the grappling defense was very good. Like, Umar could never at any point get control to the point where you thought he was going to submit him. Because Sandhagen was very good at defending these like reverse crucifixes. But you don't win a fight off defending takedowns. Fighters should know this. Defending takedowns, all that does is prevent you from just getting like held on the ground. So you're getting back up to the feet, and what are you doing? Nothing. And that's where the problem comes for me, because Umar's now going to take his position in the rankings, and Sandhagen has massively bottled it. Like, his career, he's had 3 good wins, but now he's going to have to go backwards. That title shot off the line now, he's going to have to wait probably a year or more to even get back into the mix because of all the people in there. And for Umar, as boring as I think he is very good, because I underrated him. Like, I don't even want to talk about the predictions because they were terrible. But that's not the point. The point is that Sandhagen, I don't want to hear any excuses about he felt flat, because no fighter enters a fight 100%. There's always some small thing they won't disclose to you before the fight. They might have a small injury. Maybe their shoulder aches. Maybe something hurts. We're not using that excuse. We're not going to use the excuse he looked flat. What we're going to use is he was too scared to strike. For some weird reason, he just looked to use the leg kicks. He came out aggressive in the first round. And then after the first round, the whole momentum of the fight changed. And I didn't care. When he said 50-45, it wasn't. It was a 49-46. But I just didn't care at that point, because he lost the fight. And I know you're going to be like, well, you have to care because then that judging is not right. And you're correct, it's not right. But it was depressing to watch because it was just a terrible performance by Cory. He made the fight more boring. So for me, Umar deserves a title shot, whoever wins between Merab and Sean O'Malley. Honestly, might as well do it at this point. Or if you really don't want to do it, you give him the loser. But I'd say he will be ready for that title shot because Sandhagen was number 2. And by the way, I don't think he is an easy matchup for Sean O'Malley, because Sean O'Malley now, when I think about it, I thought Cory Sandhagen, O'Malley is actually a more competitive fight because of the matchup. But now when I think about it, if you fight gun-shy against O'Malley, he will cook you for that, because he's one guy who's active on the feet. He doesn't mess around. His footwork's good. So you do really need to leg kick him. And I can see why you might think he still has a good chance in that fight, because if he leg kicks him, that could neutralise the movement. But Marlon Vera tried. Did it work in the last fight? No, it didn't. And he's got very good leg kicks as well. And even then, he looked like he was trying more than what Cory Sandhagen tried in this fight here. So let's give him a Figueiredo Sandhagen next. I think that's an interesting fight, because you're not going to go and shoot in and try and hug him on the floor, because if you do, he will take your back. Well, maybe not, because if Umar's struggling, then Figueiredo might as well. But I'm just saying that that's an actually good matchup, because his boxing's good. I'll talk about the fight later with him dropping Marlon Vera. You know all about that. But yeah, that's the fight to make for him. And for Umar, like I said, it will be the winner between Merab and Sean O'Malley. But honestly, Cory Sandhagen, I've overrated him too highly. He looked really good beforehand, but then I realised Striking for him, boxing has gone downhill. Kicking above the waist has gotten much worse. And I should have known that when this guy actually was a loss back in the day to a guy like Jamal Emmers. And you think I might be being too reactionary? I'm really not. Because this was a fight stylistically on the feet where Sandhagen should win, but where the problems come with the grappling. And Umar's striking, like I keep mentioning, it was nothing dangerous. What was it? All it was some light body shots, like right crosses to the body, maybe throwing a few feints, but I feel like Sandhagen's too overly technical with what he does. Like, he fights kind of like a nerd, and I know there's nothing wrong with that. Dominic Cruz did it, but he does it way better than he does. So I can't even criticize a guy like Dominic Cruz. But Sandhagen, he overanalyzes things to the point where he isn't a Dominic Cruz, so he can actually be hit, and he can lose a fight like that. Like Dominic Cruz, you're not really seeing him get UD'd on the feet like the way he did right there. And I'm talking about, don't bring up the fight with Cody Garbrandt. We all know injuries happened before that, and he just fought like one of the best fighters in the UFC that night. But Umar Magomedov, he didn't fight like one of the best UFC fighters on this night. He just fought in a way that Cory Sandhagen looked lost out there and did not know what to do. And it was embarrassing, especially having Trevor Whitman in your corner and you can't even box against Umar. Really? And that just shows you, even if you have a good coach, it doesn't mean everything, because if the fighter doesn't put any of the drills that he would have taught him in training, pointless. So yeah, that's all I've got to say about that. Right, Michal Oleksiejczuk versus Shara Magomedov. For me, very low IQ thinking by Oleksiejczuk, and I'll tell you why. Shara Magomedov can beat a lot of these middleweights on the feet, even if they have loads of power, because like I've said before, those kicks are like how the boxers use their jab. They're non-stop, cardio's actually quite good, and he can just keep circling and push kicking you to the body. It's like a mix of taekwondo and karate at times. And Michal Oleksiejczuk, what does he want to do? He just wants to close the distance, land a haymaker on you, and look to get that knockout. He landed on Sharabutin's chin quite a few times, and one thing I'll say about him, he's got a good chin. But one thing about Michal Oleksiejczuk, which he has bottled, is going for takedowns. How do fighters not learn? Like, you know this guy's a good striker. I believe I saw something on like Instagram saying about he will lose or something. I didn't read too much into it because I've seen stuff like that before. But it was just like the way he fought. When he was in close proximity to go for a takedown, he didn't really do it. He just continued to strike and end up getting his whole face bloodied and cut because of the amount of kicks. And even the punches by Sharaputin, they're not powerful, but the kicks look like they hurt. But what we really need to see is him go against like a proper middleweight, like a big one. Because if he does, he can grapple. He's in for like a rude awakening. And the problem is that he can only fight once a year. So him ever getting to fight in the rankings and building his way up, I can see him getting into the rankings, but I can't see him being champion because of how inactive he is. And in middleweight, we're seeing more grapplers now. So even then, it's even harder. But for Oleksiejczuk, it was embarrassing. I'm sorry, I've got to say it. When you come up against this guy and you go for takedowns in round 3, when you could have done it continuously in round 2, you could have ended up winning the fight. But instead he decides, I'm going to try and go toe-to-toe with this guy. And unfortunately, this guy's footwork's too good. His cardio's good. His accuracy is good. He just chews up the leg, like side kicks you into the body, and he will gas you out. But to be fair, he didn't seem gassed. He just seemed to keep coming forward. But what would happen? The same thing over and over again. Hit to the body, he's coming forward, and just get worked on the feet. And that was the painful part, because even though Sharabutin can be quite, like, good, it's given me Israel Adesanya vibes, like, during the Robert Whittaker fight in the second one. You know, when he kind of, like, circles away on the back foot, leg kicks against Jared Cannonier, that type of style. It's not too entertaining, because you saw before the UFC, he got all of these knockouts. You don't really see them anymore. Like, okay, the Tricoli fight, he got a knockout, but that was a fight where he was fighting a boxing bag. That guy's controller disconnected out of nowhere midway through the round, and he was gassed out, 6'6". It was like he threw away the win for the sake of doing it. He had a good first round, controlling him, and then out of nowhere, not going for takedowns, but I mean hugging him, and then ends up just getting finished by just low IQ. Not low IQ, probably just exhaustion, and he just shouldn't have been in there. So, for Shara Magomedov, if he can beat Bo Nickel, he's the real deal. I think that's the fight we need to see now. Bo Nickel, in my opinion, would beat this guy. Because he's not an extremely big guy, but he's like a guy of the size where Shara would struggle with the grappling because he's not a grappler. Takedown defense, people might say is good, but I'm not going to say it's good until he does it against a grappler. Like Tricoli, like I said before, he grapples, but he is a bum in the UFC. I believe it was debut. He won on the Contender. He was hugging. He wasn't actually looking to go for the takedown. Bo Nickel's the type of guy who looks for the takedown and doesn't hug, even if he might struggle. But I think he will be an easy guy to get down because he's not big. He won't like Jamie Pickett, who, even though he hit him with a nut shot, that guy was kind of big and strong. So the strength of him caused Bo Nickel a problem of getting the takedown compared to Shara where strength won't be a problem. I think he could maul him. Like Bruno Silva took the guy down. Why didn't Oleksiejczuk? I don't know. So, next fight. You might think this is a boring one, but let's do Oleksiejczuk against AJ Dobson if he's still in the UFC. Started off well against Edmund Shibaizen, but then ended up getting finished. And I think he could have good success early, but then after that, KO could happen for either one. So yeah, I'd do that. Marlon Vera versus Deiveson Figueiredo. You know what? I'm going to give Vera a bit of credit here. Takedown defense was on point. He bottled that fight. Round one, clear at Figueiredo. Figueiredo's good at sometimes mixing up a leg kick, but that's not his main game. It's the boxing. The 1-2s down the pipe. That cross is very strong. And what does Marlon Vera like to do? Leg kick. Just chew up that leg to make it harder for you to stand on it. And maybe him throwing those leg kicks is what made it harder for pretty much Figueiredo to shoot on those doubles and have loads of success, or even a single leg, stopping 2 out of the 14 takedowns. But for the first time in his career, he gets put down by a cross. And I don't think it's just a thing of being off balance, because I watched it back again. That cross lands and it kind of like hits him on the head, and you can kind of tell by the way how a fighter gets up, whether it was like a knockdown or if it was like I was off balance. And it kind of looked like a knockdown, because when he got up straight away, you could tell by his body language that it hurt him, but because he's got good recovery, he's back in the fight. So for me, that was a knockdown that he landed. Like, I know sometimes you see things that are a knockdown that aren't, or a knockdown which the UFC don't put down. They put this as a knockdown, and it did look like one. And it felt weird because that Sean O'Malley fight, because of the amount of damage that was in that fight, that's put some wear and tear on the chin. Like, imagine that Sean O'Malley fight never happened. I don't think this knockdown would have happened here. Because you got to think, how long ago was that Sean O'Malley fight? I don't think it was way too long ago. It went over a year ago, probably about 5, maybe 6 months ago. And when you come back from something like that, if you don't take a year off, there could be some damage there, and there obviously was. And that that knockdown happened because growing into that round 3, he looked like he was going to end up winning because he won that second round. He was starting to catch Figueiredo with a cross. His jab was working, but then that knockdown pretty much lost him the fight in the third round. There was not much he could have done at that point. So, again, Marlon Vera is in a weird spot in the division because you've got some of these fighters where they're going to have to fight down again, and it looks like sometimes they've fought everybody in the division. Like, we've already seen Marlon Vera and a Song Yadong. So, what do you really do with a Marlon Vera? Do you give him a Cody Garbrandt? Obviously not, because he didn't win his last fight. It wouldn't make sense. But you know what? If they want to do it, should we give him a Jonathan Martinez against Marlon Vera? I think that could be an interesting fight. And then we can give Figueiredo, Sandhagen, like I mentioned before. They're the type of fights. Right, Tony Ferguson against Michael Chiesa. I feel like a fraud. Why do I keep, like, when the fight comes on with Tony Ferguson and Chiesa, I even see it in what the bookmakers think. Everyone starts putting money on him. I saw the movement. I didn't put money on him, but I picked him to win the fight when I did the predictions. And I have no idea why. Because in the first round, he always starts off very well. In every fight recently, first like minute, maybe 30 seconds, he looks like he's going to do all right. And then the problems come now. It's not even the knockouts we're worrying about now. We're worrying about him getting submitted because this has become more than a joke now. We've had Nate Diaz submit him. Bobby Green, the guy who's got low IQ thinking at times. And now Michael Chiesa, which kind of seemed inevitable. If he was going to win, I thought maybe a decision because I thought he might have just tried to lay and pray on him. But then I should have realised that he looks a bit bigger than Ferguson. Ferguson, he's going to tap. Like, if he gets put in a choke now, he's going to tap. He doesn't know how to survive the submissions anymore. And back in the day, he relied on athleticism. And, like, when Michael Chiesa lifts him up in the air, you know the fight's over. Because when he mat returns him down to the ground, you don't see Ferguson look to scramble. He just looks to keep his hands on the floor and just to look clueless with what to do. And Michael Chiesa, in my mind, is finished. So with Tony Ferguson, we're at the point now, I believe he's broken the record for the most losses in a row. If Dana White doesn't cut him, this is not the end of Tony Ferguson. I'm not going to give you another... No, you know what? I am going to give you another opponent. The opponent we should give him is CM Punk. I'm not even joking. At this point, I know he can't do it because he's in WWE. Well, maybe they could because they're like affiliated companies, but he wouldn't do it. But that is the fight to make. If you want to have a fight nowadays, I'm done with Ferguson. I'm starting to think some amateur UFC fighters, not UFC fighters, amateur fighters who are on the come up in his division could beat him. And I'm not exaggerating. I'm really not. Because he hasn't got power. He relies on people to get gassed, kind of. And then he steps up the volume and makes you quit. If you can take him down, you can beat him. And even on the feet earlier on, he looked a bit confident, leg kick. Boxing, nothing was really thrown. But we're at the point again where maybe even, and this would sound ridiculous, Mike Jackson. I know he got removed from the UFC, but if you really want to get Tony Ferguson a win, they're the opponents we need to look at. Because he is probably, and this sounds ridiculous, he looks like the worst lightweight out there. And I know you're going to say, look at the people he's like losing to. It's not just the fact that he was losing to them, it's the way he was losing to them. It's like losing with ease. And I think Mike Jackson is a winnable fight, but would I be surprised if Mike Jackson found a way to outstrike him with volume to a decision? No, I wouldn't. I honestly would not. And even though he lost to a 60-year-old almost, Mike Jackson, they're the fights that you need to make. Him against Tony Ferguson. They can do it at welterweight. Or CM Punk. And you're going to laugh at that and think these are stupid selections. Well, what other option is there? There is none because this guy is washed. He is finished. And Michael Chiesa for me is finished as well. But because he beat Tony Ferguson, it's going to give him a bit of confidence in this fake delusion that maybe he's not done. When beating Tony Ferguson, if you don't do it, it's embarrassing at this point. Like, you will probably get clowned because he's on a 7-fight losing streak. So Michael Chiesa might as well retire. Or if you don't want to retire, let's give him a Daniel Rodriguez. Or, and I know this fight would never happen for many reasons, give him Terence McKinney. And I know he's a lightweight, but he can go down to lightweight for that fight. And I'll tell you why, because I believe they're friends with each other. I think it was something like his coach or something, wrestling coach back in the day. I have no idea. I wouldn't mind seeing that fight, but for obvious reasons, probably won't happen. Joel Alvarez versus Elves Brener. Oh my God, I feel like a fraud again. Joel Alvarez, I've known it for a long time. One of the dark horses of light heavyweight. Not light heavyweight, lightweight. No one ever brings up that guy's name. You never hear anybody talk about him. And his only losses have come to good opponents. Damir Asmagulov and Arman Sarukian. Good strikers. Arman Sarukian can grapple, and that's not a bad loss. Like, we all know that isn't. And then when you look at his wins, he beat Mark Chiesa, and he's kind of an annoying fighter because he can bring you down. But he did headbutt him and then get the submission. But anyways, he looked like he was going to win that fight. His striking against Elves Brener looked so good. Like, his boxing has been good. His elbows are very good, but one thing that's his issue is head movement. Because you can see that Elves Brener, even though he was losing, he was able to actually like land a heavy shot on his chin. Didn't even react. Because his chin is good, in my opinion. When he throws punches, they're not really like overhands, so like very straight, but like snappy strikes that are like in like a sniper fashion, and they're very good. And he was able to do that to his opponent, Elves Brener, and even get the knockdown on him. And Elves Brenner's a hard guy to knock down and to finish. He's got a very good chin. Kutateladze put the work on him in that first round, like just rocking his head all over the place. And he was able to survive and come back. So that just shows you how good his chin is. And then you got this guy here, Joel Alvarez, who he doesn't get too many knockouts. He's more of a guy who, if he's going to beat you, he's going to submit you. So him getting a TKO over him, very impressive to me. And who do I believe he should fight? I think, for me, I wanted to say Paddy Pimblett, but Paddy Pimblett wants that Renato Moicano or Benoit Saint-Denis. So there's only one guy left that would be entertaining. And that guy is Jalen Turner. And I think that's the fight we've got to make. Perfect matchup to me, because you've got Jalen Turner, who in the first round is very dangerous. He's big. He hits very hard. And if you don't move your head, you can be knocked down. Like, imagine this guy almost beat Renato Moicano, but because he wanted that 300k, which I get, he ended up selling that fight because he can be held down on the floor and he doesn't know what to do. He's one of those guys where he's big, but doesn't know how to use his weight and scramble on the floor or anything, and can just be controlled by smaller guys. Matt Frivola's done it to him, and so did Renato Moicano. And Joel Alvarez possibly could as well. But I don't think his wrestling is extremely good. It's all right, but it's nothing special. His jiu-jitsu is where it is, like where he clinches you, maybe grabs a hold of your head, maybe goes for a guillotine, or maybe pulls you down and goes to like a das or something like that. They're the type of chokes he gets. It's not really a bunch of like him diving for a single leg and taking you back. They're good submissions when he gets them. And I believe he's just got different ones. He got a guillotine in the UFC, an armbar, dash choke. They're not like easy submissions to get. It's not like your basic rear naked choke that a lot of people can do. So yeah, that's the fight I would do. And if he wins that, we're automatically putting him in the rankings. And if he can beat a Jalen Turner, I want to see him fight someone lower down. So if he beats Jalen Turner, we could even be looking at him fighting maybe the winner of Renato Moicano and Benoit Saint-Denis, or I was going to say Chandler, but Chandler, he's holding on to that McGregor fight. Maybe a Gamrot in the near future. But for now, that's the fight. Right, Azamat Murzakanov versus Alonso Menifield. Alonso Menifield has got to let that chin recover. The amount of damage he's taken in the last 3 months, he might need a year out now. Back-to-back knockouts. And it's not that he's just getting knocked out, he's taking like significant damage. Like this fight here, because he didn't get knocked out straight away, all that like build up from the last fight of getting dropped twice, and then in this fight here getting hit with that uppercut and getting smashed in the head over and over and over and over again in the first round, he's going to end up like a glass jaw if he don't give his chin like at least a year at this point off. He just can't accept it. He really wanted to rush into another fight because he lost in 30 seconds, and I get the anger about that. But if you really wanted to take a fight, don't pick Murzakanov. Pick it against a guy who's a grappler. And because of that reason, I want to see Menifield against Anthony Smith. I think that would be a decent fight because you got two guys where I think their matchups could suit each other. You've got the guy in Menifield who's going to be really dangerous on the feet earlier on, who has shown to have good takedown defense like he did against Jimmy Crute, but issues could come when Anthony Smith is looking to try and take the neck or like look for the back and not just shoot him for a normal double leg. But then again, knowing Anthony Smith will probably quit and end up getting finished because that is a common occurrence when he fights. So yeah, I'd want to see that. And for Azamat Murzakanov, give him Khalil Rountree. That is a very good matchup to be made. I don't know if Khalil Rountree will want that fight because he wants to fight lower down. He kind of deserves it. But Azamat Murzakanov, the guy who's broken into the rankings, undefeated. He looks so good on the feet. He's fast. He has a good amount of power for a light heavyweight, and he poses a dangerous matchup because he won't grapple. And then you'll have Kutateladze trying to explode and try and like chew up that leg. But when you have this guy who's so fast and isn't going to give you room to do that, he's going to be struggle. And we've seen when Kutateladze can be manhandled by an opponent, he can lose fights. And I think he also could in a fight here. Right, Fernandes versus Mohammad Yahya. I always knew Yahya, or whatever his name was, is a fraud. Like, he only fights on the Abu Dhabi cards, I believe. I could be wrong. But his style is so boring. He fights on the back foot, looking to counter-strike. He's very sloppy. He can't really grapple. And what happens? You come up against a guy with extremely good striking. It really is. Well, I wouldn't say striking. I'll say kicking. Because his boxing's nothing special. Just a leg kicking him to bits. Destroying that leg. Making him look like he's got an infection on his shin. But one thing he has got is power. The boxing combinations are nothing special. That 1-2 that knocked him down, he ran into that. That guy, for me, I question his chin. But Fernandes kicking looks very good. And the opponents I was looking at him fighting next, I was thinking McKinney, but I think McKinney is a dangerous fight for McKinney in terms of, look how he got knocked out by that head kick. This guy throws so many kicks, it would be only inevitable for it to happen. But I'm thinking, if you want to make more of an interesting fight, I've got two opponents that we could do. Mateusz Rebecki, I don't think he should take that fight because he'll just get hugged on the ground like what Chiesa did. But if you don't want to do him, give him Maurizio Raffi, the guy who people are making comparisons to Conor McGregor. Look at the way how he just beat Jamie Mullarkey. And even then, Jamie Mullarkey, another one who'd been an interesting fight. But for me, we should do Maurizio Raffi because that's a kickboxer versus kickboxer. And you're going to have Raffi who comes up with like different combinations. This is a fight that would end up being a fight of the night. Because I don't think Raffi will hug him. I think he will go out there looking for the knockout. And so will Fernandes. Well, actually, no, he won't. He'll look to kick the legs and then look for the knockout. He won't just go out there like Raffi, measuring the distance and standing side on and looking to set up that right hand or left hand even. And from Yahya, he shouldn't be in the UFC. Right, Shamil Gaziev versus Dontel Mays. Dontel Mays, to me, is pretty much just a guy who stands in there and tries to brawl. So for that reason, if you want an entertaining fight with him, we'll give him Mohammad Usman. And we'll start off with that because Mohammad Usman is a brawler. He just stands there and looks to trade. He's got no technical ability like his brother did with a jab. Like, he was losing against Zach Pualga until out of nowhere, hits him with a heavy overhand, bang, out cold. So for that reason, we'll give him. And for his opponent, Shamil Gaziev, I'm looking at a fight with Carl Williams. Because Carl Williams is a very strong grappler. And to beat a guy like Carl Williams, Waldo Cortez Acosta, I believe we should do that with Shamil Gaziev next. Because he can't use that basic style like he did against the Spaniard where he just bullied him with the grappling. He actually has to fight properly. He actually has to go out there and outbox him, because if you don't, he will do what you did to the Spaniard. So yeah, I'm going to go with that fight. Right, Guram Kutateladze versus Jordan Vucenic. Oh my god. We were close to getting him to win. If only that back take didn't happen where he jumps over and then ends up getting put into a body triangle. He would have won that fight because he was looking better in that third round until that point when you knew that body triangle was in. He was going to turn into Aljamain and hold him on the floor. But anyways, it's rare when a guy loses do you get a lot of credit. And Jordan Vucenic deserves it because on the feet, he looked better than Guram in the first round. In the first round, he had the odds makers panicking. The odds shot all the way down because he got... You know what? I thought it was a 10-8, and a lot of people might say, how are you going to call that a 10-8? He didn't even almost finish him. Well, in my opinion, he almost did. He dropped him on the ground and started landing some strikes, but you're going to say, because it wasn't a near ending in a lot of people's eyes, it weren't a 10-8. But for me, before that knockdown even happened, he looked sharper on the feet. He was faster than him. He was catching him with that hook. And eventually he dropped him and then controlled him. And because of that, I had the fight as a draw because he lost the last 2 rounds convincingly. So there isn't a scenario where Vucenic won the fight. Like, I'm hearing people say he was robbed. The only robbery you could say is that the referee didn't stand them up after Guram at the end of the fight started, like, hitting him in the back of the head, it looked like. But apart from that, his striking looked so good. And for me, I've thought this for a long time. This guy will be in the rankings at some point. Maybe not at lightweight, but at featherweight, 100% he will be in the rankings. And because of that fight there, I believe he's going to want to fight maybe Morgan Charrier in the future. But for me, I want to see a different fight to that. Because he looked so good in that fight there, obviously we can't give him a ranked opponent. I think if you want to give him some credibility about his name, a Kyle Nelson. Because Kyle Nelson's in good form right now. He's beaten 3 decent people. Well, not 3, I'll say 2. He beat Fernando Padilla and Bilalgio, who he looks like he could be on the decline the way he's fighting nowadays. But I believe that could be an interesting fight. Or, if you don't want to do that, maybe David Onama. I think that could be another interesting one because he's got dangerous striking, but he can gas and he can do a lot of low IQ things on the ground, which can put himself in positions where he can get submitted. And I think there's a lot of featherweights already that he could be. You might call me delusional, but he's one of those unranked guys who I believe if he fought against a guy like Alex Caceres, he would beat him. And I believe Alex Caceres was ranked. Like, there is already... You're going to hate me for saying this, and you might think I'm jumping onto the hype train. I think Vucenic could do all right against a guy like... What was his name? Rafael dos Anjos. And I also believe he could do well against a guy like Gamrot, because on the feet, he can hurt him. His jiu-jitsu is high level. Like, if you put him on his back, obviously he didn't get to really show the jiu-jitsu because, one, he was in a body triangle, and you're not going to get a submission from the body triangle if you're the guy being put in the body triangle. So, they're like, I know you're going to say, how can you say that? This guy was Cage Warriors champion. He's not one of those guys who's come in and looked like bad. He came in on short notice against Guram, who has beaten Gamrot, by the way, and actually looked like the better fighter than Guram, apart from that second round where he started to slow down a little bit. And people are saying about the coaches and stuff, but I'm not looking at the coaches. That's not what I'm worried about. I'm just like, it was just unlucky because he went for that back take. If that back take never happens, we've got a completely different fight. So for me, the type of fighter I want to see him fight next, it has to be at featherweight. Naimov. I think a Naimov, if he wants to come down to featherweight to do it, would be very good. But then again, I believe he likes fighting at lightweight because he can come in a bit bigger. So they won't do it, but Nathaniel would be an interesting fight with Vucenic. I don't know if they like each other and stuff, so they might not do it. But that, again, is another fight which could be done. But if you've got to pick one, if you want him to have, like, I'm going to say, let's do him against Nate Landwehr. That will be an interesting fight. Right, Jai Herbert versus Rolando Bedoya, another fraud pick. He looked out of his depth. He looked like he probably shouldn't be in there. And I'm starting to think, I think Rolando Bedoya is very amateur. He doesn't really do much apart from come forward and try and attack you with volume, overhands. There's no technical ability, and you don't have to be technical. Like, look at heavyweights, most of them aren't. But when you're in the lighter weight classes, you can't have that style because you're just going to get out point striked because he has no head movement. He gets hit way too often. And not only that, the leg kicks aren't doing that much damage. The only thing he can do is overwhelm the opponent to the point where he can start cutting them. But just because you're bleeding, that isn't going to win you the fight. So, disappointing for me. But Jai Herbert's a good fighter and his boxing looked better today. I thought he was going to kick more and keep it at range, but he actually looked to fight with him sometimes in the pocket. And I think against a guy like Bedoya, because he hasn't shown that power that we've seen in fights outside of the UFC, but because he throws so much, you would think it'd be able to break you down. And Jai Herbert being older, I thought it would, and it didn't. It seemed like he might have given away the second round, maybe, but after that, went back into cruise control and beat Bedoya. So Bedoya, for me, it's not looking good for him at all. It really ain't. And there's only a few opponents that I would look at giving him, because I'm starting to question if he is UFC level, and probably isn't, but I'll give him the benefit of the doubt. One more fight, depending on how he performs. If he gets humiliated, he'll be gone from the UFC. So, the fight I want to see next is a Chris Duncan versus him. I think Chris Duncan's going to try and walk him down a lot, and he hasn't got the greatest chin, so a knockout is actually open on the feet. But what the dangerous part could be is if he tries to clinch him and be annoying, because Duncan's one of those fighters where he can be very annoying and just hold on to you and frustrate you. Like, look what he did to Yano Ashamu. So it feels weird that he actually beat that guy, because Duncan, again, he doesn't really do many things special. It's very basic. He like hugs and doesn't really do anything with takedowns to win fights. So yeah, I'd do that, but you might not find it that entertaining. But it could be, because Bedoya is going to make him work hard for it. He's not just going to give him the win. And for Jai Herbert, it feels like with him, he wins one and then loses one, wins one, loses one, and he's about 36. So at lightweight, I'm trying to think, maybe this would be a good one. We'll give him Charlie Campbell. Charlie Campbell looks like his striking is improving. He can also mix up a bit of grappling. That performance over Trevor Peek was good, considering the fact that Trevor Peek's a street fighter and he's dangerous, even if he ain't technical, because he swings and he can hit hard. If he lands effectively on the chin, it could be game over. So for me, that's the fight we should do. Right, Cedrikus Dumas versus Denis Tiuliulin. Cedrikus Dumas, to me, he's a very boring fighter from what we saw in the UFC, but I think he fights in a very safe way in the fact that he doesn't want to lose a fight, so he's not taking any risk, because what he does is hug the opponent against the cage. I don't even think he does enough. I'm surprised the referee never comes in to separate them, because he pretty much puts his hooks in, well, one of the hooks in, and then just grabs his hands together, cable grips, and stalls. He does what we've seen the women fighters do against the cage, where they just hug them and they don't do anything apart from that. And if you want to do that, honestly, he's been getting a few wins now. I think he might be in a 3-fight winning streak, but they're not impressive wins. So I would like to see him fight an Edmund Shibaizen, a Paul Craig, or a Brad Tavares. But I think a Paul Craig would be an interesting one, because you like to grapple like that. You come up against Paul Craig and you want to mess about with the grappling, he'll submit you. And I think that's actually a good matchup for Paul Craig to actually win, because you might think he might stay on the feet and know that his jiu-jitsu is really good. We're not going to go to the ground. But Paul Craig will pull him down to the ground because he's bigger than him, he's stronger than him. The only thing you worry about is his chin, but Dumas hasn't really been taking many risks and looking for like powerful knockouts anymore, so I wouldn't mind seeing that fight. And Denis Tiuliulin, I believe he's gone to 10-10. He's gone from the UFC. I will be shocked if they give him another fight, because he's in the Tony Ferguson category. He's been here for way too longer than he should have been. And if I'm the UFC, I'm definitely not renewing that contract. And then when I look at opponents you could give Tiuliulin, the only reasonable one that you should do is like a Nick Diaz, because his striking is nothing special. You don't really see the powerful strikes because he can never close the distance effectively. Washed. He just shouldn't be here. So yeah, that's it. Thank you for watching. Talk to you soon.